Hello and welcome to My Safety Hub, your go-to source for all things health and safety. My name is Dyllan Steyn and welcome back to another week of Hazard Spotlight. In last week, you might remember we had a very fruitful conversation with Werner Rossouw, and he's joined us once again in studio today to continue that conversation and dive a bit deeper into the hazards and the risks associated with his line of work. We are then also naturally joined by Ockert Fourie as well. As always, Ockert, thank you very much for joining us. Werner, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Werner. I'm very excited for today's session. So, Werner, tell us, why do you do what you do?
It's a great question, Dyllan, and thank you for asking it. So we spoke last week about the regulations that say that extraction systems have to be cleaned. We spoke about the fact that a lot of restaurant owners or managers don't understand the reasons why. Some of them see it as a grudge purchase. So I thought I'd start here. In last week's video, I mentioned that if you go into a search engine and you go look for extraction fire, you're going to find some articles. So I've highlighted two of the most recent ones. This one seems to be in the UK. And it says the fire crews tackle chip shop blaze. Now, the interesting thing that I noticed here, what I wanted to just outline, I'm not going to read the whole article. It says that flames spread from a fryer to the roof of the building. Now, you got to ask yourself a question: how is that possible, right? You go through the rest of the article. It says that the fire started in the chip fryer, but then spread to the roof through the building's extraction system. So you remember I spoke about the fact that an extraction fan, when it's running, it effectively creates a vacuum.
Yes.
So that fire, based on this article, was pulled through that entire extraction system by the fan, and then naturally the oil that was inside started burning. Here is another one. This one, I believe, is in the United States. Oh, sorry, it's in London. And it says that the London Fire Brigade has issued a reminder to keep extraction ducting clean after a fire broke out in a restaurant in Pettswood, London. So this is actual fire brigade in London telling people, please keep your extraction systems clean. It says here that the ducting running from the ground floor to the first floor was destroyed by fire, and half of the restaurant's kitchen as part of a first floor flat were also damaged. So again, this is because of an extraction system that's not cleaned. So just to dive into a little bit further, this is a quick 30-second clip of a chip fryer that is on fire in a restaurant. Now, you can see the fire is starting, and I just want to pause real quick. The fire is inside the chip fryer. Both of these individuals are kind of looking at this fire, and you can see from their body language, they're not sure what to do. They're really unsure.
Very unsure.
Interesting thing here is that there's a fire extinguisher right here. Okay. Now let's see what happens. So obviously they're a little confused, and this gentleman goes and he actually fetches a bucket of water.
Oh, goodness.
And well, there you can see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I understand it, nobody was hurt in that incident, but that highlights what happens in the kitchen. That's real. And an individual that's not trained on how to handle a fire will do something like that. They will put water inside of a chip fryer, and you have an instant fireball.
Yes.
Similar to this. I'm sure you can see that photo. So this is real. This happens in a kitchen environment. In some styles of cuisine, they would do this on purpose.
Yes.
So they would deliberately burn. This looks like a Chinese restaurant. It looks like a wok. But you can see right above it, these are the baffle filters that I was referring to that's inside the canopy. So these are made of stainless steel. Now you can imagine if these filters were not in place, what would happen to these flames? Where would they go?
Yes.
So this is coming back to the question, why do we do what we do, right? So this extraction system is full of oil. Now those flames, as I mentioned, will be pulled through with a fan if the filters are not in place or if they fail. And this is a picture of a fan that has not been cleaned. Now you can see this is all oil, right?
That's disgusting, eh?
Yeah, there's more to come. It gets a lot more interesting.
I'm scared.
So you're saying this is all oil, but I mean, are there fats involved here? other lubricants that maybe have been pulled into the system, or is it only oil?
Well, if you think of a chip fryer, right, that is it's a fatty substance. It's
Yep.
and when that does get extracted into the system, it deposits against the walls of the ducting and against the fan like this.
Okay.
And that's what it looks like after a few months. So this is it's a mixture of oil and I guess you could say fatty deposits from the area. Later on, I'll show you what a silencer looks like, but I wanted to just see here in the back, you can see those grids there. That's a silencer. That thing is full of oil as well. So now imagine if a flame does penetrate here, this will burn.
So, Werner, just before we move on there, you raised an interesting point now in the Chinese kitchen where they use the wok and they purposefully set some food alight. I've been fortunate enough to see one or two instances of that happening that didn't result in an accident or incident, when we go out for dining and so forth. But what are the risks with that? Because now they purposefully ignite the food by the canopy itself. And we saw in that previous clip or picture rather that those flames reach the canopy and that filters. Doesn't that go into the extraction system? Isn't that a risk on its own? Couldn't that flame that you purposely make ignite your extraction system?
Well, if we go back to the photo of that, this is why I specifically mentioned these filters.
Mm-hmm.
So the regulations stipulate that the canopy must be made of 3 or 4 grade stainless steel, and those filters must be made of stainless steel. And the reason is exactly because of things like this.
Mm-hmm.
If that filter is made of any other material, you in the old days they used to make them from softer metals, which will eventually rust away and they will burn away. Stainless steel doesn't rust, and they are, for the most part, flame retardant. Okay. So this is a regulation. The canopy must have a stainless steel filter specifically for this reason.
Okay, all right.
All right, so let's move on. So this is we're talking about the oil. This is inside of a ducting system. It's not a very good photo, but you can see what we're talking about. You can see all the oil that's deposited on this duct. This is just more oil inside of a ducting system. This is a riser. So this would be on top of the roof, where we would have removed a fan to get to all of this oil. That's just more examples, and more examples. Yet again, you can see the amount of it that sits inside of this duct.
That's crazy.
It's an incredible amount of oil, and we usually find this amount of oil in typically restaurants that do a lot of grilling. They do a lot of basting, using basting sauces. You kind of find these kind of things.
Okay. So, Werner, just on that, because that's a lot of oil, that's a lot of debris that obviously shouldn't be there. And right. I know we spoke about general cleaning intervals, which we'll circle back to in just a moment. But out of interest's sake, what is the time frame from after service? Let's say you've just finished servicing the system, right? And it's brand spanking new, it's sparkling clean. What is the time frame from when it's sparkling clean to when it looks like this again?
Okay, so it does depend on the restaurant. It depends on the type of cuisine that's made. Mm-hmm. If you consider like I mentioned just now, let's say a steakhouse. So some of your prominent steakhouses in the country, or some of your very prominent chicken restaurants in the country, they use a lot of basting sauces, a lot of grilling. Mm-hmm. While the regulations say the canopy and the extraction system have to be cleaned at least once in a 6-month period, we find within 3 to 4 months, it already looks like this.
Sure.
In your more healthier restaurants, 6 months would not look as bad as this. And a lot of those clients say, well, yes, we will clean every 6 months, but really we only want to clean every 9 or 10 months, which we obviously say to them, you shouldn't. But so it really does largely depend on the type of restaurant, the type of food, but it also depends on if the extraction system has been designed correctly. If your ducting is large enough, if your fan is large enough, most of that oil is expelled into the atmosphere. If your fan is undersized or underpowered, it doesn't have the strength to pull the oil right up out into the roof, and it will eventually deposit like this inside of a ducting system.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Right. So this is just again some of the things we remove from the extraction system. So this is directly above the filters inside the canopy. This is fats and oils. You know, this is
And this is a picture you took, Werner. I'm correct in saying this is
a picture
stuff
that
you've
we took.
seen.
This is one of the photos that we've taken to show a client afterwards. This is what we've removed from your system. Now I need to say here as well, this is extreme.
Yeah, well, it looks that way.
This doesn't happen every day, but we do find this, especially in systems that have not been cleaned in a few years. This is the kind of things you find. Not only is there a fire risk involved here, but you can imagine this is a severe health and food health issue as well.
I was going to ask that question. I mean, we've obviously got a fire hazard here. It's problematic. You know, if the filters fail, the flame gets pulled into the ducting system. Eventually, you know, all of these oils and greases and fats are going to ignite. You know, sets the building ablaze. But how does this affect the food that's being prepared on the counter or the food that's being grilled? I mean, because this is in the system. This is, I would imagine it's after the fact. I mean, it's behind the filters, presumably.
It is behind the filters. I want to draw your attention to this channel right here. Okay, this is where your filter sits inside. Now, this channel is supposed, right on the side there, you can see there's a small lip there. That's called the drip tray. So all of that oil is supposed to filter down. It's almost like a gutter system into that drip tray. Okay. But you can see there's a lot of oil that's sitting in here. Now, what happens is sometimes your filters aren't installed at the correct angle, and so they start dripping oil back onto the cooking surface.
Oh no.
Yes. Not just that, I'll show you in the following photos and videos as well what happens where oil collects and where it pools up. Sometimes it starts leaking through the ducting system, it leaks into the kitchen, it leaks onto cooking areas. So, you know, it's difficult to specifically pinpoint why it affects food health, but it does. Because it will drip and it will flow into areas where food is being prepared.
Okay, so am I correct in assuming that if your filters are overworked, not cleaned up, your drip tray isn't working the way it should, that all of these oil and fatty and greasy particles that are supposed to get extracted into the system are basically just flying around in the kitchen, and they then get deposited on work surfaces, surfaces where they're preparing other foods as well, like salads, breads, whatever the case may be. And I currently have a bit of a cold, so if I'm now working in the kitchen and I maybe have a bit of a sneeze or a cough, because of the surfaces now being greasy, all of these bacteria are now collecting on those surfaces. So now we're just spreading communicable diseases throughout the community.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
I want to also mention on the note of filters. So we advise our clients to wash the filters at least once a week. So these filters have a grid system. I'm not sure if you can see my hands. I'm sure you can. The filters have a grid system that looks like this. So the air is supposed to flow through the filter so that there's not an opening straight through. Okay. Now, if those are not cleaned once a week, eventually oil deposits sit around this area and it closes down. It closes off because there's too much oil in the filter. That does restrict airflow. So your air that's supposed to be extracted cannot move past the filter because it's blocked.
Yes.
And that's also when we typically have situations like this where the amount of oil that now suddenly starts depositing on top of each other becomes so much that you end up with situations like this.
Yeah, now I'm hungry.
I'm not. All right, so I want to move on real quick. Sorry, let me just pause that real quick. Okay, we were talking about oil leaks. We were talking about oil. Now, this is a video that we took. We had a client saying, listen, I've got oil coming out everywhere. Please, can you come and help? We eventually had to remove a whole section that closed off his canopy on the top. And what we found, this is on top of an extraction, on top of the kitchen canopy. Okay. I want you to note the sheer amount of oil, and considering as well what we just spoke about in terms of a fire. If a flame does collect here, but just... So I just want to...
You must be joking.
I want to go back to that real quick. I'm just going to turn off the sound of that video real quick as well. Just look at the amount. This is unbelievable. I want to note as well, this is a half of a 2-liter bottle. This is full of oil already, of that what they've collected. That's a bucket that they're busy pouring it into. And again, just look at the amount of oil that's sitting on top of the extraction system, on top of the canopy.
So this isn't in the system. This is on top of the system.
This is on top of the canopy. The reason for this, and this is what this video will show in a second, is right there. I want to just, there we go. You can see there's a problem there. The ducting is not fastened to the roof of the canopy correctly. There's no sealant, there's no rivets in it. And so this is what we refer to as an air leak. So the extraction system pulls the air out, but it leaks out through this hole. And with that, oil comes out as well. Now, this is probably over a course of 4 or 5 years that this has occurred. But that's the amount of oil that could potentially be if your system isn't designed correctly. That is a huge risk.
Yeah, for sure. That's a lot of fuel right there.
That's a lot of fuel. You're right. Yeah. And to just further reiterate this point, another video, and I want to just talk about this first before I show you the video. So we were contacted by a client that asked us to come and clean their extraction system. Question immediately was, we haven't worked with you yet. When was the last time you cleaned your system? The manager on duty said, look, I've been here probably 6 years. It's never been cleaned in my time. Before that, I don't know. This was a video of probably halfway through the clean of everything that has come out of the system. Now, this is in the kitchen. This is on the kitchen floor.
On the kitchen floor, you say?
This is while we're busy cleaning. This is everything that's come out of the system so far. I mean, if you look at this, it is an excessive amount of oil. This is everything that we've removed probably halfway through the cleaning of this system.
Wow.
So that's insane.
So again, if I can just, this is like a small little river of oil. It is unbelievable. So guys, this is why we do what we do. This is. I mean, there's a couple more things I want to show you, but so from a safety point of view, the fire risk dramatically increases the longer you leave your system. If you don't clean it, this is the kind of thing that you're going to be sitting with. And we looked at the articles. Extraction fires do happen. This is on top of a roof. Again, it has to do with oil and it has to do with the fire risk. So just for context, the extraction system is sitting here, and oil is leaking out of it because of a silencer that has not been replaced or a silencer that's full.
Okay.
All of this oil is pretty much flowing down the roof into the gutter system of the, in this case, it was a mall, into the gutter system of the mall. This, if a fire does get to the top, this will ignite.
Right.
If it's hot enough, etc. So again, these things have to be cleaned.
And also, I mean, if this is now leaking onto the roof, goes into the gutter system, rains come, I'm guessing it also will eventually end up in the groundwater.
Yes.
Which is affecting the immediate environment, and that's not good for anybody. No,
not at all. Okay. Because most gutter systems don't go into a tank or into a stormwater facility. They go into they pour out onto the ground. So yes, eventually you're going to have a massive amount of oil in grease and fat that's deposited onto the ground. Plant life will be affected. There's a health issue there as well. Yeah.
So that for me is a huge environmental impact, and I'm a big advocate of environmental health and safety as well. So this begs the question then that surely the employer now not only has the responsibility for a safety reason to service this extraction, but from an environmental perspective as well. Because if you neglect to service this and it starts impacting the environment, that opens up a whole different can of worms. And by the looks of it, if you take shopping centers, for example, there are multiple restaurants within that shopping center, not just one or two.
Correct.
Every single one has an extraction system, or should have an extraction system.
They're supposed to have, yeah.
So imagine 5, 6, 7 restaurants all not servicing their equipment. Where does all that debris go? Into the environment. Surely there is some type of liability here, and I'm very keen. I'll do some research on this and see what the possible repercussions and consequences might be. But I think this is, or should rather be, an eye-opener for restaurant owners in this regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
To not only affect the safety now that we spoke about, but now we see this infects the environment, which is just or as equal importance as the safety of your guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and someone somewhere will do an investigation, and someone will be held liable.
Yeah, surely they must.
Shocking.
All right. So just real quick again, kind of last photo, but this is again just some of the things that happens while we're cleaning. You know, this is underneath the canopy as the team is busy cleaning. You can see all that oil and all the muck that's come out of there. So this all just draws back to the point of cleaning, why we clean, and the fire risks associated with it. I want to talk about this one real quick. So we were talking about hazards. The extraction fan not working is a hazard. So we get a phone call from a client, extraction fan is not working, and we go on site and we do an investigation. Now this is the fan blade, the impeller blade of the extraction fan.
Right.
That's lying inside the canopy. So when we remove the filters, that's a filter right there. This is lying right on top of the canopy. So the question is, how on earth is this possible? So I wanted to talk about this as well. An extraction system is designed to remove hot air, oil particles, and smoke from the kitchen.
Right.
Some extraction fans have an impeller like this, which we refer to as a polypropylene or a plastic impeller. Staff members come into the kitchen, they start cooking, they don't switch on the extraction fan because it's not hot in the kitchen. It's early morning, and hot air rises past that impeller over time, making it soft. And when they eventually switch on the extraction system, because it's now hot in the kitchen, the amount of RPM and the torque that motor uses to start actually breaks the blade. And that happens. And so now you're sitting with an extraction system that doesn't function. Unfortunately, these impeller blades are not all made to specific sizes. You've got different sizes. Now you have to go and try and source one. That client will potentially sit for a day or two without an extraction system working. Purely as a result of negligence from start side, because they haven't actually switched it on before they start cooking.
Well, also they don't know. All right. I mean, it's when we go back to the photograph of the grease on the roof. If you're not aware of the issue, you're not going to do anything about it. And we can only really mention negligence where there's awareness.
Correct. Yeah.
So
you're right.
For me, the key is how to create that awareness, where obviously this conversation becomes very valuable. But if the staff member, has a job to do and there's no procedure to follow and the understanding why the procedure exists, they're not going to apply it.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Which is again why I said last week we need to have good conversations with industry. We need to have good conversations with restaurants and anyone that's involved in the commercial kitchen, so that staff are aware of the use and the function of an extraction system and how to use it the way that it was designed to do.
Okay, speaking about that topic, it makes me think about a conversation that we had regarding risk assessments. Extraction system would now definitely be or need to be considered on your risk assessment. And while doing so, it is then prevalent to develop an SOP that we spoke about for maintaining this extraction system, using this extraction system. Because as Werner now said, it's kind of an ignorant thing. The guys in wintertime don't put it on because it's nice and warm, and then eventually they put it on. But there needs to be a process in place for this. And I think if there's a standard operating or safe operating procedure in place, we can mitigate a lot of these things from happening. So it becomes more and more critical for me as we progress through this conversation.
Yes, I agree.
All right, so we were talking about hazards connected to an extraction system. So I wanted to just highlight the fact that, okay, so there's a silencer, this is a ducting system, and then you've got a weather cloud sitting on top. So none of this is motorized, right? This is all just static material.
Right.
But I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that somebody fastened this thing with a rope. Talk about a hazard. Okay, so there is a bracket system in, and now this is the way we found it. Obviously, we have repaired it since. But these are some of the things that we come across. This one is quite interesting, and again, talking about hazards. So this we actually found in a corporate building in the middle of Sandton in Johannesburg. So what we have here is a fresh air system on the top and an extraction system on the bottom. Now, the way that these systems are designed is you've got brackets that's supposed to hold up the system in place. Now, somebody shoved a piece of wood in there.
Right.
You can see the brackets are bending; they're not in place. And then I don't know if you noticed, but the entire system is held up by a brick. So I'll go to the next photo now. This whole system, that silencer, the fan, that silencer, and the ducting is supported by a brick. There we go. It's a better photo of it. Now, the interesting thing is that somebody put this in there. This is the actual electrical box with the switches for the extraction system, balanced on a piece of wood and then
On a brick.
My goodness.
So we were talking about in the interview last week. We were talking about service providers that don't follow the regulations. These are the things that we find that we have to go and repair afterwards. The things that we have to go and fix. And a client is unaware that this is happening on top of their roof. And I'm going to say this: the unscrupulous service providers would walk down and say, "No, everything's fine. The system's working. We're done," and they would go away, and they would leave the system like this. Somebody that walks on this roof that's unaware of this, there's so many things that can go wrong with this. I'm sure you know as well, Ockert. I mean, you can crush somebody.
Right.
This whole thing can collapse. There are other support brackets in place, but there's supposed to be another one sitting right here. And so just again, some of the hazards and things we find. That same system has got exposed wiring. Somebody just left the wires open. We have no idea if that's live or not. It's not been blocked off.
Well, you can just grab it and find out, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess we can. So just moving on real quick. This is something I want to talk about. We have had this happen probably since we started in 2020. I don't want to overestimate, probably 15 or 20 times. This happens at least twice a year, at the least. So a client finds our system, our extraction fan is not working. All right. This is a kitchen towel, a lappy. Now you have to ask a question: how does that's used in the kitchen end up inside of a fan?
How does that get in there? I mean, you've got a filter system.
Right.
I don't understand.
So I have witnessed firsthand a staff member with a mop cap in the kitchen. It's time to close, and the SOP there would be, when they close, remove the filters and soak them overnight.
Okay.
So the extraction fan is still running. They take the mop cap off and they throw it into the extraction system. And then you have things like this. We've had instances where, I beg your pardon?
Do they do that purposefully?
They throw it in because it's funny. A mop cap gets sucked into the extraction system, oblivious to the fact that this kind of thing happens to the fan. We've had instances where a fan was unable to turn because the mop caps were sitting around the shaft of the extraction fan. I think we removed 18 or 20 mop caps, individual mop caps, that we have to try and get off of that shaft. It completely blocked the shaft. On the same note, I'm not sure if you can see what that is. That is a hat. That is a staff member's hat. Again, the client phoned, the fan is not working, and this is what happened. So we asked the staff members what happened. And the individual said he was busy cleaning, the filters were off, he was wearing his hat, he was standing on the little step ladder with his head inside of where the filters are supposed to sit, his head inside, and just with the wind, just pulled his head up into the extraction fan. There's another photo of it. It's completely wedged underneath this impeller blade, and this has actually caused the fan to burn out. We had to remove that fan, and we had to rewind the motor to get it. So these kind of things happen, and I think it's important for restaurant owners, kitchen executive chefs, food and beverage managers to be aware that this kind of thing does happen, and to have a talk with their staff members. Be careful when the system is on, because there is a proper airflow if the filters are not in there, and also have a talk with them that they don't purposefully throw stuff into the extraction system, because this does happen, and you can actually cause a motor to burn out.
Yeah, and surely if you throw something in, and as we now saw with that hat being caught in the impeller, that creates an overload on the motor that drives that impeller, which in turn generates heat, and what is enclosed in that whole system, the oil. So in turn, that itself creates a major hazard now. That motor itself could potentially cause a fire to happen.
That's right.
Is that a possibility at all?
Yes, I believe it is. Yes. So, I mean, if we go back to that first photo, you'll see. I'm not going to go back all the way, but the fan has a cover in the back that where the electronics are contained, the wiring, with another wire that goes out through the fan housing to a switch on the outside. So sometimes that cover in the back isn't sealed properly. And I'll actually show you a photo of something similar just now. And that oil might actually get into that. So yes, if there's a spark or an electrical fire inside that motor, there is a possibility that oil can start burning. Absolutely. And remember, the fan is normally situated right next to the silencer. And the silencer is your biggest risk, which I'll show you in a minute as well. So yes, I think there's definitely a possibility that an electrical fire in the fan can cause an extraction fire.
Okay. So word to the wires, don't throw anything into the extraction system.
Nothing.
Please.
Nothing. And keep your system clean.
And keep your hat on.
Keep your hat on, yes indeed. This is not to do with extraction, but I wanted to just illustrate this as well. So part of what we do is chimney cleaning for our clients. So these things are necessary, and a lot of people also don't know that a chimney is supposed to be cleaned once a year. So this is what we removed from a chimney in the town of Dalstroom. This is all soot, and this stuff is flammable. So this is sitting directly underneath directly above a fireplace. So you can just imagine the risk associated with this. And I just wanted to illustrate it as well. So in a message to anyone that's watching the video, if you've got a chimney, if you have a restaurant, lodges, hotels, if you've got chimneys, make sure that they're cleaned at least once a year. All right, so I wanted to illustrate as well. You'll remember we spoke about the regulations that stipulate cleaning to the bare metal.
Right.
So this is what an extraction fan looks like before it is cleaned, and this is what it looks like after it's cleaned.
Well, a big difference.
So you can see we clean it right to the metal.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is oil that sits around there, and that is where the potential hazard is. At the same time, oil buildup on a fan will eventually cause the fan to seize up because it affects the bearings, it affects the shaft, and it affects the actual motor turning. So that's the way it's supposed to look when it's cleaned. This is just another photo of ducting, a ducting system before it's cleaned, and then the same ducting system after that it's cleaned. And I specifically wanted to put these in because that is what the regulations say. That's the standard to the bare metal. And it's very important for anyone that is going to be contracting a service provider, ask them for the photos. Let them share with the photos of what they've done in your ducting system so that you can verify that they've done it correctly. Just again, some things we find. I cannot explain how this happened, but pretty much the impeller broke off from the shaft with no idea why, no idea how it happened. But these are some of the things we find. The risks associated with this is the fact that this is metal. So this metal component turning at probably 2,500 RPM, it's suddenly dislodged from the shaft, and it can cause significant damage if it's not secured, if it's not installed correctly.
Right.
Again, things we find inside an extraction system. This was removed from the outside ducting, and actually this was removed from a fan. So you can see this is all hard oil that has been sitting there for years. And again, this is flammable.
Werner, sorry, just to stop you there very quickly.
No, not at all.
Now, this debris and all of this amounts of oil and soot and everything that we now seen, what do you guys do with that then afterwards? How do you dispose of all of it?
Yes, I was going to ask the same question. I mean,
All right,
there must certainly be rules on
Yeah.
how you dispose of, these fats and oils and grease. So what do you do with it?
Right. So this kind of oil we are allowed to dispose of in a normal dustbin. Okay, because there's no what's the word? There's no biological hazard necessarily connected to this. So we usually everything gets binned and bagged in heavy duty refuse bags, and they are disposed of in what you would in a normal dustbin,
Like a skip or whatever the large ones are. Yeah.
Yeah. Oil that you're not allowed to do that with, or not oil necessarily, but there are organizations that do cleaning of fat traps, for example, kitchen fat traps. That kind of liquids you're not allowed to dispose of in a normal dustbin or in a drain system. You need a special permit to dump that at a designated area at a dump site.
Okay.
But this kind of oil and this kind of residue we are allowed to just dispose of normally.
Okay, interesting.
It makes kind of sense because, I mean, surely the oils and stuff that accumulate there was once used to prepare food. So it is of a food grade quality, which theoretically shouldn't pose any risk to humans, nor animals, nor, anything else in that matter.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to take a bite, though. I don't know if you want to take a bite.
No, thank you. Neither am I.
No, definitely not. Okay.
All right. We're almost done. So earlier on, I showed you a photo of a ducting system with oil on. This is pretty much the same one after the inside has been cleaned. Once again, just wanted to illustrate, but this is not stainless steel. This is a galvanized metal. Also, this with new regulations, this is not allowed to be installed anymore. If you're doing any new installation, it has to be. I'm sorry, no. No, I'm referring to the canopy. This is the actual ducting system that is made of galvanized.
Okay.
Right. So to talk about electrical hazards, now what we're seeing here is I'm not sure, it's not a very good photo, but there's the corner of the canopy. Right. So this is directly underneath the canopy. This is a stainless steel plate that has been installed underneath the canopy, and this plug is pretty much situated half in and half outside of the canopy. Now, what happens here is, sorry, I thought it was another photo, that oil will drip from the canopy, and what has happened here, oil came down. You can actually see the streak marks from the oil there.
Right.
And it penetrated this electrical box, and obviously from the evidence there, you can see that there was a short.
Yeah, it just blew it out.
Yeah. So what I want to say about this for anybody, either if you have an existing canopy or if you are going to be installing one, make sure that there's no electrical plug points underneath the canopy. No isolators, no plug points, no switches for lights, nothing, because this thing will happen. At the same time, over years, oil builds up in and around those electrical components, and you're going to have a short.
Isn't there a regulation or a SANS code within the framework you work in that stipulates that may not be done? Surely, my common sense tells me you cannot have an electrical system, because if I have a look at that picture, that's cut into some of the ducting as well. And surely that cannot be right. That tells me that isn't installed correctly. It's the same concept as you cannot install any light switches or plugs within the bathroom, for example, where there are showers present. Surely there needs to be a similar clause.
Dyllan, within the SANS 1850 document that we follow, there's no specific clauses to this. But I mean, if you consider building regulations, and you consider the regulations that have to do with electrical installations, this kind of thing should not be there.
Yeah, I agree.
And whether this was installed before the stainless steel cladding was installed or after, I don't know. But if I'm an electrician and I'm looking at this, I'm not going to issue you a COC for this. I can't.
No, definitely.
So this begs the question again: how did they get a COC? Do they have a COC? You know. So yes, your comment is spot on. My common sense tells me, and we agree. However, what we find in the industry completely contradicts what our common sense tells us should not be in place, and we find it more often than you can imagine.
Yeah, well, Ockert and I know that story all too well. Common sense is not so common, is it?
Not at all. No, unfortunately not. Just on the same note with electricity, this is on top of a roof. This is a photo that my team would send me. This comes from the DB board, and this goes to the fan, and this is the way it's connected. It's completely exposed. Obviously, risk of electric shock. My team would usually make sure all the electricity is switched off, and then first take, because again we're not electricians, but what we can do is take something like insulation tape and close that off, just so that the risk for us is minimal. Right. And then this is reported to the client, please come and fix this. Similar thing here, this is a wire that goes into an extraction fan. You can see there the earth wire and the live wire is exposed on this. Again, that's an electrical shock hazard for us. So before we can do anything, this has to be solved and reported before we're even trying to remove the fan. Right. And again, something that electricians should preferably do. We were talking about the fan. This is on the back of a fan, right? So this is where all the wiring comes in and is connected, and et cetera, et cetera. So the cover of the back of this fan has been removed for some reason. Again, this is how we find these things, and you can see what's inside of that electrical box is oil. So yes, sparks, fire here could possibly result in a fire here, which could then spread to the outside of a fan. Yeah, this is obviously for us as well. This is a electrical shock hazard. This has to be solved before we can actually work on the fan. So there's just another photo of it. We don't have to talk about that now. This is what you remember last week we spoke about some of these extraction systems that's installed in such a way that it makes it very difficult for cleaning. This is an example of that. So this is a fresh air intake system, and the one next to it is an extraction system. The weather cowl and all of that has been removed already. But we need to build a scaffold, and we were talking about making a plan, right? And trying to actually get to these systems. The individuals that installed this, it was installed in an incredibly difficult and awkward position. It would have been better if that system had a 90-degree bend and it was actually horizontal on top of the roof. It would have made the cleaning and the maintenance of this a lot easier. But this is some of the things that we find that we have to make a plan with, and some of the other cleaning companies that would simply say, sorry, it's not accessible. Yes, it is. It's just not going to be easy. You're going to have to make a bit of an effort.
Werner, so just on that note, I think this is an eye-opener not only for me, but for any potential clients or any business owners that have similar extraction systems. Your job is not just simply pitching up, servicing it, and going home. When you need to build scaffolding, that encompasses scaffolding erected training, scaffolding inspected training, working at heights training. You need to buy harnesses. You need to educate your employees on a whole bunch of different things. So
you need to have medicals done.
Thank you, Ockert. So this now for me becomes a whole lot more complex than I originally thought, and this is why we're having these conversations.
That's right.
Again, in the health and safety industry, we are often seen as a grudge purchase. And I think it's very similar for the extraction game as well. The guys don't want to spend money unnecessarily for servicing the extraction system. That's why they push it to a year, 2 years, 5 years that we've now spoken about. But they don't understand the amount of work and the effort and cost from your side that needs to go into these projects.
That's right, Dyllan. You're very, very right. And a lot of organizations see it as a grudge purchase. They go for the cheapest price, which you can do, but there's going to be no guarantee that your system is actually cleaned. And yes, there is for the most part, our clients have fairly accessible and easy systems to clean. But these things happen. These things do happen. If you look at this building in particular, I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ducts that sit against this wall. This is a trash compactor right down the bottom with a very flimsy roof. You can't access anything on that side. Which effectively means that they can't be cleaned. Fortunately for us, the level here is flat. We could actually erect a scaffold. But yes, there's a lot more now that comes into play, which takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to make sure that you're working safely, but at the same time to try and help this client to get their system cleaned. So yes, sometimes there's a lot more effort and a lot more that happens behind the scenes that people are aware of.
Sure.
So we were talking about silencers, right? So this is a normal silencer that we put on an extraction system. Now I want you to note the type of material that is inside here. It's almost like batting. You know what batting is? When you upholster something, they use batting.
Yes.
Okay, so this is similar to that. So what happens is over time, this will collect oil. This silencer is meant to dampen noise inside the kitchen as well as outside on the roof. After time, they look like this. So we were talking about fire. We're talking about the fact that the extraction system creates a vacuum and pulls that fire or that flame through the system. You can imagine this. It looks like mud, but this is oil. Gentlemen, this is oil and fatty deposits that's sitting against us. So if this thing starts burning, considering that it's got this kind of material inside of it, you can imagine what's going to happen. I want to make a note about the silencer as well. We can't clean it because of this material that sits inside of it. You can maybe scrape off some of it, but you can't actually get to where most of the oil is sitting in a silencer. Right. So these things act as similar to a vehicle's air filter. It has to be replaced every 15,000 kilometers, right? This silencer for most clients needs to be replaced within a 2 to 3 year period. It is an interchangeable part of the extraction system. And the reason I put this up here is people need to see this. This is what happens inside of your extraction system over time. That silencer will also start leaking oil. And you remember the photo we showed with the oil leaking down the roof? Right. This is the reason why. Because that oil is nowhere to go. It's so compacted. Eventually, with heat, being it in the sun, that oil will start flowing and it will start leaking out of the extraction system. So very important to note this.
So just a question, as a matter of interest, sure. Do you guys issue, or do service providers that do this work, do you issue a certificate after the system's been cleaned up, or after the silencer's been replaced, or filters have been replaced? Are there certificates issued to the owner of the restaurant or to the franchise, stipulating that on this date, this system was cleaned up and is now fit for duty or fit for work?
Yes. Yeah, we do issue a certificate.
Okay.
The certificate basically outlines the date that it was cleaned. The certificate is valid for 6 months. We do stipulate that it was cleaned in line with the SANS 1850-2014 regulations. Okay. And on that certificate, we will note if there are any inaccessible areas that could not be cleaned. We would note things like this: the silencer that has to be replaced, or if there's any other problems that we found on the ducting system. We generally send an email to the client as well, advising them of any problems we find. For example, the silencer has to be replaced, and we do that because we need to keep a record of our communication with regards to these things. I do see this as a risk, not only the potential of a fire, but also the oil, pouring out everywhere.
Right.
This also makes your external system incredibly heavy. So a normal silencer, one man can pick up. It probably weighs 15 to 20 kilograms. When it's full like this, it's probably close to 60 or 70 kilograms.
Wow.
Incredible, yeah. And to remove it places an immense amount of strain on an external ducting system. So, your brackets, everything is carrying heavier, and all of that weight eventually gets put onto the roof, which has to try and carry all of that weight. So
you're looking at structural failures as well that can actually take place. Yeah. All right.
Potentially, yeah. With an old roof, we sometimes do walk on a roof, which is questionable. With old truss systems, it's possible that you can have structural failure. Yes.
Okay. And these, just going back to the certificates, do you know if these certificates are displayed by the restaurants? Because quite often, when you walk into a restaurant, you would see, there's a certificate of acceptability, some kind of food safety certificate from the local municipality or the local governance. Do they display the certificates for the servicing of these systems as well?
My clients, most of them, yes, they do.
Okay.
They have what do you call it? One of these clipboard frame.
Right.
Where you open the sides and you can remove a document to put another one in. And so yes, they are supposed to be displayed, but there are individuals or organizations that choose not to do so.
All right.
The health or certificate of acceptability of food premises, I know, is usually prominently displayed in the front of house of a restaurant. Yes. There's no regulation that I'm aware of that says a certificate for the cleaning of an extraction system has to be displayed to the public. The only thing that I'm aware of is that if a health inspector is on site, they need to be able to look at it. Also, as I mentioned last week, that numerous insurance companies request proof that it's been cleaned, so they would take our certificate and send it to the insurance companies. Okay. And then also a lot of larger organizations will have their own internal audits where, and especially franchise systems as well, where the franchisor will expect the franchisee to produce a certificate.
Well, I mean, coming out of the industry, when I go and dine out, I always look for the certificate of acceptability because that shows me, obviously that they are following certain protocols. But I can tell you now, after this session, I'm definitely going to request the extraction system service certificate as well before I sit down and eat.
Yeah, no, Dyllan, I think it's important. I think it's important that we communicate this message. There are health concerns connected to an extraction system. And as I mentioned to you last week with our interview, unfortunately, this industry is self-regulated. We have no governing body. If you think of the NHBRC with building regulations, you can't build a building. You can't do these kind of things without being registered with the NHBRC. And you've got an inspector that's going to come sign off your building work. You have a COC for your electrical installation. You have a COC for your gas installation. But for some reason, when it comes to extraction systems, there's just no one that looks at it. And it creates a huge problem in the industry, in the fact that the canopies are designed from the wrong material, they're installed too high, they're installed, or the design of it's wrong, the fan is too small, and the list just goes on. So yes, again, I think we need to communicate this message and start asking for certificates. Say, listen, has your system been cleaned? Can I see proof that it's been cleaned?
Sure.
We might upset a few restaurant owners, but it's all in the name of health and hygiene. That's just another photo of a silencer that I was referring to. This is maybe a little bit better photo, but you can see all the oil that's in there. Again, huge fire risk. Incidentally, this is a poster from inside the shop. that somehow got pulled into the extraction system. Fortunately, it got stuck on the silencer. It didn't go through to the fan. But you remember the hat and the things that people throw in. There's a poster. This is an A3 poster that's gone into the extraction system.
That's crazy.
Absolutely crazy. Wanted to talk about this real quick as well. We get a phone call. Our extraction system is not working. So okay, we access the roof and we find this. Okay, I've never seen anything like this, and I was at a loss for words, and I thought, how is this even possible? But then I started looking and I started investigating. So I asked the client what happened. They said no. A month prior, they had somebody install new silencers. Okay, so you can see this silencer. It's not full of oil yet. You can see that it's starting discoloration and all of that. But when we started investigating, we found the following. So this up here is called a riv nut. So that is installed inside the silencer so that you can put a bolt through it.
Okay.
Now, what we found was this whole fan was connected to two silencers with a bolt there and a bolt there. That's it. There was no other bolts were fastened. Okay. What we found instead was screws. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that's a screw that's gone through the flanged housing of the fan into the silencer. The screw,
right.
There's another screw down there. A screw cannot hold up a fan. This fan probably weighs 50 kilograms. So what we found was that, and then here in the corner here, you can see there's a part of a bracket that's sticking out that's supposed to hold the system. So when this individual or this organization installed these silencers, you can see it's very poor workmanship, and they didn't follow protocol. They didn't use the riv nuts that they were supposed to. They fixed screws. The brackets weren't installed correctly. And within a month, maybe I think it was 5 weeks after the installation, the whole system collapsed like this.
Wow. Yeah.
Now the damage, fortunately in this case, there was no damage to the fan, to the extraction fan. We could simply take the fan off, connect it straight onto the ducting, and we had to go and make and manufacture new silencers and come and install them. But it brings me back to the discussion about a regulating body.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who checks that this kind of thing is done correctly? And the answer is nobody. Which is why, again, what I mentioned in our last interview was why integrity and honesty in this industry is so important. If I'm going to be installing silencers for my client, I need to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen, which means I need to follow the right standard of installation. And unfortunately, what we see is there's many organizations out there that don't follow the regulations.
Right.
And this always draws back to the question we started off with, Dyllan, is why do we do what we do? And it comes back down to purposefulness, making sure that our clients' needs are met, that they have a functioning extraction system that's not going to fall apart, that's safe to use, and that ultimately does what it's supposed to do, which is remove oil particles from the system.
You were talking about the regulatory body, and I'm still thinking about that certificate of acceptability, and whether the scope for that certificate includes these systems and the checking of these systems and the cleaning of these systems, and whether that certificate shouldn't be withdrawn even temporarily until a system is cleaned up, if there's someone that actually checks to verify that it's not clean. I mean, the risks are massive. I'm actually shocked. I've never thought about these systems in this way. I think after our last conversation, I got quite intrigued into what all the risks could be. I did a bit of reading on it, but yeah, I'm actually at a loss for words. For the type of things that you find out there. It's really shocking.
To come back to your question about the inspections. We do have people phoning us saying, look, I've had the health inspectors here, they want my extraction system clean. What the health inspector is looking for is a certificate. Okay, so effectively, and again, I'm saying this carefully, effectively we're looking at a paper pushing exercise. I need to produce a piece of paper so that the health inspector can give me a piece of paper so that I can operate my restaurant.
Right.
But nobody really knows what's going on inside. which comes back to regulation, which comes back to a kind of a regulatory body that can accredit organizations and certify individuals that do the design, installation, maintenance, and cleaning of these systems. Then we know, okay, we've got somebody that has been registered, that has been accredited, that is doing what they're supposed to.
Right.
There's a reputation of an organization, and we know we can trust that certificate. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before, but we had a phone call from a lady in Zanin many years ago, and she said that she owns a number of chain stores, fast food, burger, pizza, chicken and fish organizations. And she said to us, no, she had somebody come through last night. They cleaned 7 of her restaurants' canopies.
In one evening?
In one evening. And I said, okay, how many people were there? She said, no, there were 4 guys with their bucky. And I said to her, listen, I'm sorry, but I'm going to tell you now that they didn't clean your system. If we clean a big steakhouse, I'm using 7 team members, and they're probably working between 7 and 9 hours to get that system clean. So this is the problem. And that lady received a certificate for every one of those 7 shops for that one evening. It's simply not possible to clean 7 shops in one night with 4 people. It's just not possible. So it comes back down to the question is, who's issuing the certificates? Do they know what they're doing? Who's checking them? So these are huge concerns for me in this industry.
Right.
I think, Werner, in line with what you and Ockert just mentioned, yes, a regulatory body is necessary. If I refer this back to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, we have the Department of Labor that acts as a sort of a governing body for health and safety. But I think it's not only enough to have a governing body that can educate and train people. Yes, that is a start. But it's one thing to train and educate people and say, yes, now you are certified and you are a registered service provider to do this, and you know the correct way according to the SANS codes. But will that still stop or mitigate them from taking shortcuts? We've seen that's not always the case.
No,
so I am of the opinion that with a governing body, there also needs to be a form of an inspector, like we have with the Department of Labor, that can go back and verify. And that might be internally appointed person from the governing body. It might be appointed a different service provider like yourselves to go and do quality inspections on this. Because it's one thing to certify, it's another thing to do the job effectively. Because now the only difference is now I'm certified to give you a certificate, but I'm still just going to spend 2-3 hours on a system. There needs to be quality assurance behind this as well.
That's right. No, I absolutely agree. You can't have regulations and not enforce them, and not check that they are being implemented. Which is why I mentioned the NHBRC. My father happens to be in a civil or come from a civil background, and if you're going to be building, you need somebody to come out and actually give you a certificate. Before you can continue building. And so that's an inspector that comes to do checks to make sure that building regulations have been followed. We definitely need something like that in this industry, where if an individual or an organization is going to clean an extraction system, they need to be it's impossible to check every single system that's been cleaned. It's simply there's just not enough manpower for it. But at least let's start doing spot checks. Let somebody say, all right, well, you've registered with us. Send us a list of the last 5 clients you did, and we will randomly select one. You need to send us photos of it, so that we can make sure. I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary to have that. The word fails me.
Quality insurance,
accountability. Accountability systems. We have to have some kind of accountability system in this industry. Otherwise, at the moment it is a free fall. Everyone pretty much just does whatever they want.
Right.
Okay. Werner, thank you very much for a very eye-opening conversation today. I'm thoroughly
You're very welcome.
shocked, and I'm definitely going to think twice before dining at certain restaurants, and I'm going to ask for these types of certificates. Ockert, I believe you too. You love dining out, so I think this was a shock of you as well. So, Werner, thank you very much for all your insights today.
You're welcome.
You very much for all your fruitful conversations we had. And then for the viewers out there, if you have any questions for Werner, please drop a comment down below. And if you like this video, hit that bell icon, leave us a like. And then as always, stay safe, stay inspired. And until next time, take care.